My guest on this podcast is Zee Razaq, somebody who's a chartered accountant, a tax advisor, and also a business advisor as well. And it blew my mind when he shared with me that 70 to 90% of your income is being taxed and disappearing. And we break down this podcast exactly what you can do to take control of your financial future. So let's get straight into the podcast.
In order to pay for the masters, I ran promoted R&B hip hop nights.
Okay.
So I was fortunate to meet DMX, Kanye West in my 20s. And you
You didn't strike me as an R&B guy, but go on.
I did. Do you know what? It depends on what years you see me. I did like that at that time, and that was in my 20s. My dad was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 11 years old, but he was my role model. Every inspiration came from him. But so if I look at his attributes, what was his biggest things? It was being able to build relationships, being trustworthy, and being able to then deliver. So because when you're delivering in a business, there is no safety net, is there?
Yes.
And that requires a lot of self-confidence,
Yeah.
resilience.
Bet on yourself, yeah.
Remember, English was probably not his first language, but he knew how to speak to people.
Yes.
And people already knew that what he says he's going to do. And that's what I've tried to do.
Zee, our conversation earlier, you absolutely blew my mind. We talk about many people tend to think about taxes. You know, they're going to be paying 20 to 30%, and that gets deducted from their pay slip, and then they get the rest of it. But, you know, you were telling me earlier, most people are probably losing in tax between 70 to as much as 90%. That's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, do you know what? Most people are, because they're not seeing to end impacts. And I think that's the difference. Because you think about it logically, depending on what you're doing, if you're getting a job, you lose, if your base rate 28% or 42% is gone, it can even be up to 62. That's income tax and national insurance. Then you go and buy stuff.
Yeah. That's the ones that most people see because it's written on your payslip each month.
Well, they don't even see it because they get it net after salary. So they've got used to not seeing that money. So that's where the mindset. Then they go and buy stuff. Well, how much is VAT? Another 20%. Then you go and buy road tax, council tax. You've got business rates.
Fuel, yeah.
Excise duty on VAT, double whammy. Then that's not just that. And they don't stop there. Then you go and buy a house.
Yes.
Stamp duty. Yeah. You sell it and it's not your main house, capital gains. And even when you're going to leave the planet, they haven't stopped.
They've got you there.
The dreaded IHT, which is 40%. So I think I'm underestimating. You may actually net end up, and some people actually end up in a deficit, which is mind-blowing. But that is what's happening in reality, and most people don't think of it that way.
Very few people tend to think about this, and it's not the most exciting topic when we talk about tax. No offense to anyone. But the key thing is, ultimately, it's about taking control of your finances and you being in control and having financial choice. You know, whether we use the words like financial freedom, financial independence, ultimately, it's about the ability to be able to choose what you want to do, where you want to do, because you're in control of your money.
I think you hit the nail on the head. For most people, it's understanding what is your options. Because we were joking earlier, there was a common saying, death and taxes.
Yes.
I can't help you on the first one. I'm afraid that's outside my hands. Death. Taxes, they are not set in stone. It's depending on the choices. And if you consume now, and you're going to feel it. But if you consume later, you're likely to protect yourself and build a bigger pool of funds to be able to consume.
Just elaborate what you mean there by consuming now and consuming later.
So what I mentioned when it's 70-90%, a lot of that is based on consumption. So when you get a salary, unfortunately, there's a few ways to mitigate, but it's harder because you're already taxed at source.
Yeah.
When you're an entrepreneur, you're not actually taxed at source, and you can do things to offset your tax bill. Pension contributions, the write-offs, home office agreements. Don't want to bore people. There's a long list. Loan interest agreements. These are things that you can offset.
These are legitimate expenses that you can offset. So rather than, for example, I'm buying a new laptop for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use it for work and stuff. So if I'm paying for that after I've received my salary, then what I'm paying for that versus if it's being purchased in the business for the business use, actually the true cost of that is very different.
It is, because if you think about it, just what I mentioned there, if I bought a laptop in a limited company, I'm using that as an example, and it's a VAT registered limited company, the LTD will claim back the VAT.
Mhm.
So there goes that, you got back the 20%.
Yeah, it's £1,000 laptop, for example. That's 200 quid saved.
It's less than it's divided one sip, but
Yeah.
yeah. If it's 1,200, then it's 200.
Yeah.
Sorry, get the numbers. And then the next bit is you claim something called capital allowances.
Yeah.
And you can claim, in that case, if it was 1,000 plus VAT, the £1,000 against your corporation tax bill. So you're now changing the dynamics, and you can utilize that asset to drive more revenue. Because that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you've got to start thinking about what's going to get you the profit, what's going to maximize the money, what's going to generate, having the right equipment, understanding lead generation. We can go a whole conversation around that, but that's how you grow businesses. And when we were talking off air, the two drivers of generally income, there is more, is either employment or being an entrepreneur. I challenge most people in employment, you're not going to earn generally enough money. There is certain people or be able to save enough money because you're losing most of it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you've got more choices, and with the right planning and the right advisors, you can utilize that to grow your personal economy. I.e., what is it better? I think we were saying earlier, better that you have the money or the government decide to do with your money. Not saying that the government shouldn't have some money, but you should have a bigger say in what you do.
How it's used, yeah. So, paying tax isn't a bad thing, essentially what we're saying. We all need to contribute towards society. In terms of how that money's being used, we may not necessarily agree or how some of that money's being spent. And if you have more control over what you pay and how you pay, and it sometimes feels like many people are choosing to leave the country and go somewhere where there's no tax to pay. But that isn't necessarily the answer either, not paying any tax or contributing.
Really, really good point, Saj. There is, I think the stat was every 45 minutes last year we lost a millionaire, and they went 2/3.
Well, I've
yeah,
heard that before, but
that's what it is. It's madness. We've been losing them for a few years now. It's accelerated, and 2/3 are gone to Dubai from the United Kingdom, which is quite big. And their driver is there's no income tax, no capital gains, and no inheritance out there.
There's still some taxes there, but generally it's kind of perceived as it's
not corporation tax is 9%, but right now there's a small business rate exemption. There's loads of different things. They've got reliefs out there as well, and there's things you can do there which you can't do here. VAT is 5%, which is 20% here. And stamp duty, don't get me started. Their equivalent is 4%, which is negotiable down to 2%, depending, because the buyer can contribute because they've got no capital gains.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different model. But why people move there is to get this choice, right? Because the cost of living is higher there as well. So it's balancing all that up. And the people say the heat between May and September is quite extreme. All right. They've not got perfect cloud seeding yet because they've developed their own rain out there, which is mind blowing in itself. Right. But it's got opportunities. But people these days, because they're mobile, they're thinking worldwide view, and we're helping people on that entrepreneur journey because, when you get older or more things, the heat is a good thing. So there's different reasons why people move to Dubai, and tax isn't always the main driver. But is it part of the toolbox or something you should evaluate? Yes, depending on your circumstances. I think we were talking, and you were like, look, I've got all these family commitments. Right. Same here. Those things have to be weighed up. What's important to you at that time and right for you and your family. If these are the key things that drive your decision making.
Yes. Many people are watching this. They'll either be working somewhere in a job, or they might have a small business they're building, or they might be they're doing property full time. They built something much more substantial. So we actually have quite a range of background that people are watching. In fact, it's probably very beneficial if you pop in the comments box, let us know what your background is, what you're doing right now to help us understand. But when someone's in those kind of different places, how should they be thinking about taking control of their personal economy, as you refer to it as?
I think the biggest thing, and you say financial free, financial independent, or choices, the reason what they've got to do is know where they're trying to get to, right? And we talk about 10-year roadmaps and things like this. It's a sat-nav to financial independence, right? The modern day words. Right?
Yes.
People don't look at maps these days, but on Google Maps. And it's having a mapped out journey.
Yes.
Where you start.
Having clarity where you're trying to get to and then mapping. Okay.
You've got to start with that. What is driving you? And you've got to reward yourself on the journey. Most people fail because they haven't got a plan. So they don't know whether they're doing things right or not. They haven't invested in knowledge. And they haven't got clarity who's going to help them to get there.
Yes.
If you do all of this, generally, if you look at people who've got plans, the rate of success people we've worked with is way higher, you know, and then you motivate yourself with outcomes. What is going to drive you? Is it having a nice car, and you might see some videos of Lambos and things like this? Or is it send your kids to private school? Or is it having that security? There's so much. Or is it having a nice holiday a year? Or is it, I'm going to exit to somewhere in Europe or Middle East?
Whether you're trying to create more income today or whether you're trying to build something for the future, so everyone's in a different place and what they want might be different as well. You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month, we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book onto the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's always got to start with cash flow. And that's why I was talking about lead generation and trading businesses. How do I get cash? Because when you generate cash, you've got more options.
Yes.
Then it's, what do I do with this money without losing 70 to 90% of it in the process?
Yes.
Because if I keep 70 to 90%, and the audience can guess, will I be more successful?
Yeah.
Will I achieve the end outcome more? And this is where we've got a lot of passion. And I think we were talking earlier, you know, you've got to understand that this is not an exact science. It varies from individual to individuals, but planning and actually having the right people, huge difference maker.
Yes. And when we talk about the kind of route to financial independence, as it were, in terms of when people should start thinking about that, I'm certainly a big fan of, you know, even if you're working for someone, you should be thinking about a side hustle, building something, testing your skills, experience. And these days, so much can be done online, and even tools like AI are completely revolutionizing the world in terms of the possibilities. So we could all set up a business to kind of explore things and try things and start getting more control of our money. What's your thoughts on something like that?
I'm going to name drop here someone called Daniel Priestley. I don't know if you heard of him. Very talented guy.
Yeah, hasn't responded to my message come on the podcast yet.
The
next time I see him, I might have a word.
Yeah, got to, because he's put it in a nutshell. Because I've been fortunate to speak to some very forward-thinking people who have been very successful, and that's a privilege. And understanding demand of what you can do is what he talks about, waiting lists and things like this. So if you're talking about testing and you're doing something new, he's right. Should you test? Or do you have the confidence to back your ability?
Yes.
And, you know, I was corporate world, you know, I think we talked about earlier. I used to work, my last job was working with Santander. So I managed a cost base of about 2.5 billion, so over 100 million quid, worked for about 5 years. They were complex, if anyone knows banking. But it changes your mindset because you see how people can be successful, how they can scale the mindset, because that's a business model that's been successful a number of years. So you learn from these. They constantly were testing.
Yes.
And they had very good marketeers, sales, because that's the first bit of whatever you do, whatever you want to be successful. If you don't know how to sell your goods or services, you're not going to be successful, are you?
Yes.
And those skills you have to invest time in.
Yes.
I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. You touched on a little bit about your experience. Take us back to how you got started, because you're an accountant, a tax advisor, you know, a business advisor. How did this all come about? Share us your journey.
Do you know, it goes back to, actually, it's quite interesting. It's always weird sitting on the other side because we do podcasts, and thanks for asking the questions. Before I forget, I'm really humbled to be on here, and thank you, Sad. You do a lot for the business industry and trying to showcase people of different backgrounds and their journey. Regarding this, I think it starts from school days even, right? How do you know, I don't know whether you're right or wrong, I sold a few dinner tickets, because you used to try to do stuff. I was telling you, I bought a science book, right? That was my first bit. Then I went to university, not far, in Leicester, did my University Leicester, which found DNA. I went and done my degree and master's there. When I got to the master, because I was working back in B&Q. So I worked, right, for 6 years. I was traveling every weekend due to family responsibilities, which I think I mentioned earlier, and we'll get a bit more into it. In order to pay for the masters, I ran promoted R&B hip hop nights.
Okay.
So I was fortunate to meet DMX, Kanye West in my 20s. And you
You
had
didn't
to.
strike me as an R&B guy, but go on.
I did. Do you know what? It depends on what years you see me. I did like that at that time, and that was in my 20s. Yeah, I think one of the major parts of the entrepreneurial journey is when you start your first major type of business. And I think one of the things we were mentioning, talking about, was how did I pay for my masters, right? Because I had enough for traveling 100+ miles every weekend, working B&Q. Well, not much.
I was working for B&Q back at home.
Weekends, yeah.
Oh, well, so then traveling back up to Leicester.
I literally used to get a train from Leicester to Luton, Luton to St Albans, the bus from St Albans to Hemel, and go and work the Saturday and Sunday. And do my family responsibilities. I think we will talk about a bit later why that was so important. And then Sunday night, come back. And then Friday, I did enjoy the nightlife, party life. So Saturday morning, literally no sleep, knackered. After 3 years, I felt it. And then I thought, look, there's got to be an easier way of doing this. So we started promoting the nights.
Right.
And the reason why you got onto that was you learn about sales and marketing. Getting the local takeaways to sponsor it, meeting people. I was humbled to meet people all across the world because 2 major universities there, Leicester and De Montfort. So you're going and speaking to people after people, and you learn what's driving them.
Yes.
You build relationships. We probably ended up getting to know, because between the 2 unis, I think it was about 40,000 students in those 2 unis, right? Because Leicester had about 20 and De Montfort had 20. And then you had the locals.
Yeah.
So we probably ended up knowing 50 to 100,000 people. And you were out there, and then you were like, right, so this relationship, and it was quite mad because...
But it's very easy to go down the party zone life. What made you focus on, actually, I need to build a career, a profession? Because that's not the family background. You're not from a family of accountants, so...
Yeah, do you know, the entrepreneur was driven by my dad. So that bit... I'll be honest, I never drank alcohol, so it was very unusual, but I was like, how am I going to get revenue to pay for the masters? They weren't cheap. But it all goes back to my dad. I think you were asking what drives you.
Yes.
My dad was an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 11 years old, but he was my role model. Every inspiration came from him. And I used to go with him and used to buy cars. So he came to the country. He could not actually read, write in English.
Okay.
But he's the biggest entrepreneur I've ever met. So that put that in a nutshell.
I guess that also shows it's not just about academic qualifications that leads to success in business. It's the ability, the drive that you have to have. And when you tie that in with education, the right education, you're if I can put it on turbo.
Yeah, I think you put the nutshell. So if I look at his attributes, what was his biggest things? It was being able to build relationships, being trustworthy, and being able to then deliver. So because when you're delivering in a business, there is no safety net, is there?
Yes.
And that requires a lot of self-confidence,
resilience. Yourself,
So when I seen that, and I was humbled to go with him and see how he spoke to people. Remember, English was probably not his first language, but he knew how to speak to people.
Yes.
And people already knew that what he says he's going to do. And that's what I've tried to do. So back then it's about personal brand and relationships, even then.
Yeah. When people say old school, my word is my bond, that's really essentially a personal brand, isn't it? It's a trait. You get associated, you're trustworthy, reliable, you stick to doing what you say you're going to do.
I don't even think it's old school. I think it's been for all time.
Oh, people refer to it as old school,
But you're very, very good point on that, Saj. But I think anyone that, you speak to, if you can't, especially if a trusted relationship, like an accountant, tax business advisor, or anything where you're having a relationship with someone, right? It's not a transactional relationship. It's all trust.
Yes.
Are you going to buy something from someone that you don't trust or don't like?
It's interesting. We've gone into this conversation around kind of entrepreneurship, what creates somebody, because this fascinates me. It's the idea of what are the core skills, what drives success, how do people become successful from a kind of financial business perspective. And when you think about those things, and I kind of obsess about some of those things, and I've talked about many times before, I've been such a big fan of Sunday Times Rich List as an inspiration. How do people build these obscene amounts of wealth? What drives them? What creates them? And when you read my first kind of collection of books was mostly business autobiographies.
Wow.
And when you read their journeys and what they've done and how they've done things, which is why I'm almost always fascinated about how do you do what you do? Why do you do that? What drives you? And there's got to be, as you said, there's got to be a big burning desire where you want to do something. And it's got to be, there's going to be an aspect of knowledge as well. You need to understand. Then it's going to be your environment, who's around you, how they're inspiring you or how they're pulling you down. And you might want to get out of that situation to change your life and say, I don't want to, I want to get away from this to have a different life. And, you've got to have the belief in yourself, the mindset that, am I going to be able to do this? And we all doubt ourselves throughout life, and big times where we don't. So, are these well, if you try and describe that, some people would say, why would somebody want to do that? And that's the life of an entrepreneur. So do you think that's something we are born with, or is it something that our environment creates, entrepreneurs?
I think it's a combination of both. I was saying, I think you've got to have some natural ability, because if you haven't got natural ability, it's harder. It's not saying it's impossible, but it's harder. But it does really help. So if you have parents who help pushing, I know there's a lot of people who have not had that from their parents and they've still been super successful, but it does help. So
that's the environment.
Yeah, exactly. So if I looked at my dad, his number one family legacy goal was, can all my kids be educated? And thank God that got answered even after he left the world. And but that was his passion. And when we look at that, and I look at him, how is he inspired? The only missing thing is he didn't see my children, right? Because the inspiration comes from that environment and understanding. That's why you follow us on socials and all this family legacy. I go on about it, and everyone's like, "Why are you going on about it?" I said, the question I ask people when they come for consultations and things like this is because they're like, "Why do I bother inheritance tax? Why do I even bother with that stuff?" I'll say to them,
I'll be dead when they're dealing with it. So you hear it?
I hear loads of things. Some I may not want to repeat here, right? And I say to them, listen, have you met anybody that's left the world, taken the assets, and come back and told the story? And one person said to me, yeah, Jesus. I said, we're still waiting for him. He hasn't turned up yet. Because then, now I understand. First, they look at me like, what's he saying? But when it hits home, because you only have one cut at this. And if you don't build that legacy, invest time, knowledge, resources, right? What are you? Is it just purely consumption? Which is okay for some people, I'm not disputing that. But if you want to give most of it away to the state and you're happy with that, that's your choice.
Let the government deal with it once you're gone.
Because they can
leave
take
all the money to them.
And if you haven't got a will and things, they can take all that. That's, people don't realize that, right? Or there's a deep
we talked about someone's other podcast recently as well. We don't think about these things, but there's so much you are just leaving outside your control.
It goes back to the 70, 90%, 40% of whatever you got left after it. And these are the things that surely you should be passionate, get a plan in place. I say to people, bring your children, bring your spouse, because it's a family aspect. They have to know what you're doing, because a lot of time is why they say this, in my experience, they haven't had buy-in. They think the kids are not. And we've dealt with some very big names, as Saj will know, from beginning humble backgrounds all the way to the high level. And the big differentiator is the disconnect. The kids or the spouse doesn't necessarily know the sacrifices you think they do. They don't. You have to tell them. It's not being arrogant. It's just saying, look, these are the things I've done them for you as well. Not just for us to have a great lifestyle now, but it goes generational.
For the future generation benefit from.
And most successful legacy planning, most successful people, and you're talking about big estates, a lot of this is that. It's about relationships and how have you accumulated wealth. And people that are very wise on this, they tend to give the next generation a better start, provided they've passed key requirements over, not just the financials, because whether I can say that a lot of people spunk the money because they don't understand what involves to manage it. So you have to, part of your legacy, invest them. If you see mine, I have my kids on the social all the time. A lot of people are like, why are you doing that? Because I'm educating them. So we were humbled to get an award.
Just recently you won an
award.
We won. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. It was so humbling. Not just...
And what was that award?
Count of the Year 2025 for the Global Business and Author Awards. And the biggest thing for me was, it's not just me, the team, the family, then me, right? Because my mum was there, humbling.
I saw the photos.
My family, and thank you for the nice message back. The children, the missus, the team.
They experience it. All experience it.
I think the bit that we get caught in is we think it's all up on us.
Mm.
You're just one part, right? And that is quite mindset. And if you can make sure you be the glue,
Yeah.
then it's much bigger, and it achieves the people that are super successful. And I've been fortunate to talk to these people, got the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, even up to almost $1 billion. I did speak to a billionaire in Dubai, blew my mind.
Yeah.
And
thinking on a different level.
Yeah, 16, 17 years, a billionaire. I asked people, when did you meet a billionaire last? The conversation with these kind of people is about what value do they collaborate. They never say it's them, then. You have to ascertain what level they are by the conversation.
Yeah.
They are collaborators. They constantly raise other people.
Yes.
And they get it by default.
Yeah. I think that's so important in a position like that. It's almost your responsibility to bring people with you. And, you know, some people are very good at certain things. Some people are very good at making money, for example. It might not be, other parts of their life might not be as rounded, as it were. And ultimately, it's about resolving problems. That's what you're doing. So as an entrepreneur in a business, you're resolving people's problems and you're getting paid to resolve those problems. And as an entrepreneur, you're looking for solutions to problems. And you seem very entrepreneurial to me. And an accounting route seems a very safe, conservative approach. So how did you move then into, or make the decision that this is the route you're going to pursue?
When I looked at business, right, I always wanted to be entrepreneurial. And for me, what was one of the biggest things, putting sales and marketing, because obviously that's so important. Anyone who tells you otherwise, they don't always understand business. What was I really good at? Maths was quite good, right? That was my default. And I thought, do you know what? This profession, first of all, it looked a bit stale, but it depends on the person. If you are passionate about anything, it's interesting. Even accountancy, tax. I know you said earlier, when you listen, hopefully, you've got to have passion for it.
Yeah.
If you've got no passion, you could be doing the most exciting thing on the other side. It's not making you feel it looks rubbish. You could be doing the most dullest thing, and you're passionate is the most exciting thing. And the entrepreneurs that I see real success, it's not always just financial. The non-financial is as big, if not bigger. Are they happy? So it goes back to what I said about helping people. One of the most important relationships in business, and you'll know this, Saj, is with your accountant, tax, business advisor. If it's not, find a new one, because it's not working. And most people don't understand that, because they've got to know everything about you. They've got to know the relationship. I joke, we're counselors and all sorts. Those are the soft skills that you've got to know. And sometimes you have to be tough with people, whether they like it or not, because you've got to protect them. Protect them, save them money, help them make money, legacy planning, exit. There's a whole journey. But it depends on what your mindset is. And how do you understand a business? One of the ways you do is you financially evaluate. And that's why I got into accountancy, tax. You know, I actually preferred economics, to be honest. I did a degree, because you understand what's happening. And how can you make that happen? It was a bit of a safe option in some aspect, but it helped me to get to where I needed to get to now.
You still ultimately at a point made a decision that actually I'm going to work on my own and build my own business and my own practice rather than continue to work for somebody else.
I initially worked in industry. So I did a bit of practice and then did industry. And that's how I got to. I worked for people like Mothercare, Connaught in construction, hence property understanding, a company called Vocalink, Santander. So I understood multiple business models. And what I learned is, if you know how to financially evaluate a business, you actually know how the business works. Most people don't know that, because when they have experience with an accountant, it's like this boring person, or there's a little cliche, right? But they don't realize that most entrepreneurs, right, after sales and market, understanding that if they really want to scale and keep things, they are financially understanding, or they have good financial people with them, and they know how to ask the right questions. And I've worked, unfortunately, to be speaking on big executive committees on multinational banks and all this. They know how to evaluate, is this going to work or not? And one of the indicators has to be financial. And if you don't know how to assess a financial model of a business, then I would argue, how are you an entrepreneur?
Assessing what's it doing well? Where's the opportunity in that business?
And that's the difference, because most of these your audience may have experience with accounting as a processor, right? Apologies to people who do that.
Which is what we mean by that is they're taking care of your books in terms of bookkeeping, the relevant filing, the compliance side.
Yeah, and do you know that's the thing? But with how the world is evolving, the entrepreneur who's forward thinking, whether they're at the starting, middle, end, they want more than that, right? And they, provided they understand the value, because everything should be linked to value, they're willing to invest.
Yes.
And that is the journey where you can help them so much, because when you have someone phone you up and say, Zee, you just saved my marriage. Zee, you just helped get my children involved. Zee, you just helped that legacy planning. Zee, you've helped me now go to somewhere else where I always wanted to get to. Zee, you've helped my kids go to school. Zee, you've helped me get that car that I always wanted. It's not a vanity matrix for these people. It's, I've really worked hard for something.
Yes.
Some stuff I personally want, and some I want with my family and the loved ones, and all. People have different priorities.
Yes.
And in different times of their life. And that is what I think a true business advisor, accountant, tax advisor should be aspiring to, because you're the one of the tools that can help them get there.
Yes.
Who else can help you get there? You know, if I get back to example, if you can help them create a pound, lead gen, sales, understand how the business works, systemize it so it's hands-free, and then keep most of that to make better financial decisions, tell me who gives you more value than that profession. I'm struggling to find any profession, and I've worked in complex business models to simple ones, from SMEs all the way to multinationals. That's why people who think like this and have that financial understanding and acumen, they're a difference maker. I don't know, what do you think, Saj, on this?
You raised some very interesting points, and I think one thing I particularly like about your approach is you like to roadmap out where people are going and how they should be getting there. Talk me through a little bit about how you tend to do that and what you look at.
I think one of the biggest thing is for people who really want outcomes, and I have to say that, have to be motivated, right? You've got to think 10 years. And the reason why I say 10 years, and people are like, whoa, see, 10 years, that's a long time. I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Because if you think year, you always underachieve.
Yes.
Because it's a cliche, but it's true.
I see, was it Tony Robbins saying, or he might have even had it from somebody else, where people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years.
Yeah, and then they get demotivated because they say, I've underachieved in a year, I'm not going to achieve, give it up.
Yes.
But 10 years...
the compounding effect of what you're doing in the first 1, 2, 3 years.
Huge. So I'll give you an example. And I did the presentation, which will go live about this on our channel, is if I look at a client and they've got a trading business, the first few years is profit maximizing it.
Yes. Trade business when they're buying, selling something or a service.
Good services. It can be property development or property trading. I'm not talking an investment for rent. So they do that and they get the cash flow, right? So they can cover their expenses, their lifestyle, their expectations, and then they rapidly start investing in assets, right? First move, just for anyone, got to be something called a SaaS pension, small self-administered scheme. If you're a trading business, you've got a limited company, or you've got a limited company, definitely look into that. I've got an episode that I did on that on Sky TV, so check that out.
We'll link that in the description.
Thank you. And that will help you the first step. The second after that, third step, first step's the business, second's that. Third is, what is the best asset? In my opinion, that's why I'm on the legendary Big Property podcast, right? Property. This has been going for hundreds of years. Forget the noise. They're not telling you the truth. It's one of the few assets that does three things. It's tangible. You can feel it.
Yes.
Secondly, it appreciates. And the third one, where gold falls in, though gold is a good asset, cash flows if you do it properly. There is no, tell me any other asset that does all those things.
That gives you the income as well,
there isn't none, because you would have to sell it and then trigger tax off, right? So if you know that, and these are the outcomes, so we say to people, think about having £1 million exit for your trading business, right? When I mean exit, it's the valuation on exit, right? Because that's your gain when you leave.
Yeah, there is an exit, and that exit is either one you plan or the one when they carry you out in the box. There is an exit.
Do you know? I know a lot, but it's true because but even if you're not going to do it, long as you get that, gives you the option. And if you've got a target you're working, then it's going to happen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Number two, have a pension pot over $1 million because you're diversifying. The tax advantages are huge. You can go and watch the episode and all the rest of it. Huge. Then you start becoming a banker, and we'll touch probably on that. Number three, property investment. People like Saj, and there's a number of others who are trustworthy. You can watch their stuff, invest in knowledge, and then get a property strategy that works for you. And honestly, the wins.
Yes.
You've done it for a long time. Many others. That property investment can be a difference maker.
Yes.
And we say, you should be looking, so at least £250,000 revenue, because what happens is, as soon as the cash flow turns off in the trading business, because you can't run forever, you need something else to have it in.
Yes. That should be building up the income.
And then the pension's there as well. So you've got multiple. And if it's you and your wife and your kids, these are minimum numbers. And people are like, Zee, really? We've had people 10x even that. And it's just like, when you do it with a plan and you say, I'm going to do this, 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 and hold yourself accountable, and you've got someone who can hold you accountable and then help, because you think about it, it's the compound, isn't it?
Yes.
So if I've got a trading business earning me money, investment earning money, property investment, a pension, I'm tripling now. So if something happens over here, I'm covered. And people just don't think about that.
Yes.
And then if you have your children, the satisfaction that they can be your legacy cell, or even your team, if you haven't got children, there's ways of sending it to kids, or your team that are currently involved.
It can continue to operate it and run the business. Yeah.
And then you've got property investment, 250 is what, 20 grand a month gross. Yeah, you probably half finance costs, so 10 grand. That's quite a nice lifestyle. And you've got a pension pot. And by the time you got there, the compound after 3 to 5 years, it accelerates rapidly because you've got multiple sources. And if you do it smartly and invest time in knowledge, right? And this is where business coaching is so important. How do you structure a bit? How do you systemize it? How do you have all these things working, right? Because time is what you're trying to buy back.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got kids at 7 and 9, could be 10. They're my legacy.
Mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. And, and my family, because I can't buy that time. Plus, I've got the missus will be on my case saying, why are you doing all this?
Yes.
And that's the real, what I mean about choice. Choice buys you options to be able to buy your time. And when you said earlier, most successful people, they value their time.
Yes.
And therefore they understand
that's the most valuable asset. Time.
But a lot of people don't. Like when they look at account, this, because they're not valuing.
Yes.
And then they get what they pay for, right?
And I remember in my earlier business, my previous business in IT, our focus was on selling time because that's how we made money. Right, we're selling 3 hours here, 5 hours there, engineering service here. You're doing some consultancy work or something. You're selling time. And it wasn't until I got involved in property, and I remember one of my early mentors saying to me is, you've got to value your time. Meaning that you've only got 24 hours, so what do? You're going to run out. Well, you can charge a bit more than you're going to run out. How do you do that? So your time is more important than money. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. So how do you use that time? And building things in that time that will continue to make money and generate money, building systems, processes, etc. So when we think about business and maybe a property business as well, there's various different aspects of those businesses. You've got the accounting side, you've got administrative side, you've got to think about people, teams and things. And when someone's starting out in their journey, or they're at the stage where they're trying to do the early stages of growth, what things do you think are the more important sides of that business they really should be thinking about?
First of all, are you resilient? I'll say this in a respectful way because it's a lonely world sometimes being an entrepreneur. We're talking about most people give up because it's lonely. Because everyone doesn't understand, because they don't understand they have to make payroll, all this fun, right? So that's one. Are you going to be strong with it? Then secondly, clarity. And you get clarity by mindset, investing in knowledge. So if I'm going to invest property, have I actually understood the different property strategies? Right? Because you often, you'll teach this as on a high level, you don't always need a lot of cash to do certain things, depending on which strategy that you do.
Yes.
And they have a learning within their do. I'm going to quote Robert Kiyosaki here, right? You know how he got into property. I watched his thing. He went on a course that he bought on a credit card, and he had to do 100 deals.
Wow.
And he just, and that's how you par. And he goes, the knowledge he got from going through and being resilient and getting no's and all sorts, the 100 deals set him up for life.
Yes.
And he's probably one of the most famous property entrepreneurs in the world. Yeah, they've got different write-offs in America. We'll get onto some of those that you can do in the UK. But if you start thinking like that as an entrepreneur, you can make a huge difference, because the time doesn't become the issue then. It becomes on value and outcomes. Because when you're on the other side trying to sell it to your family, not just the people that are going to rent your houses or buy your goods and services, you got to give outcomes, right?
Yes.
If you haven't got clarity on those outcomes, or you don't feel, I actually know how I'm going to get those, then you're likely, because there's a crazy stat, not to scare people, over 10 years, 96% of businesses fail. Yeah, in the first 2 years, it's like 70, 80% even. And a lot of them, unfortunately, don't get the right support, because they're told that they're not explained about value. They look at, I've got to keep every cost down, all this. But if you don't invest in training knowledge, you don't invest in the right business advisor, accountant, tax advisor, who's going to help and knows your journey, how are you going to be successful?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Invest in the right marketing agent, all these different things, because no one teaches you this. And you've got to invest. So the biggest asset a person is their mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
The intellectual property, which is what's in your head, right? If you've got
the self-talk that you give yourself,
that's huge. So one of the achievements was I was fortunate to be on Sky TV, I mentioned, right? And that's pressure, because when you're on screen,
yes,
millions of people can see what you said. You can't hide.
Yes.
Get it wrong, especially in my profession. Scrutiny is very high.
Yes.
But you need to know and have that confidence. And in your head, it doesn't matter who you are. Everyone has doubt. That's called being a human.
Yes.
And what you've got to do is be confident and show that you can achieve. So being on a podcast, privilege, right? And it's showing confidence and adding value, and trying to make sure that can the other person really understand the value that you're communicating. And I think whatever business we talk about, it always comes back to that for me.
Yes.
From my knowledge. And you probably may have so many different variables on that, but I see the biggest trait I've seen on most successful entrepreneurs. When you've spoken to a successful entrepreneur, because they communicate the value, right? That you understand, right, I'm going to do this. This is what the output is. Because humans, we're simple.
Yes.
If I start talking about complicated tax planning we were talking about, people will be like, so you've overwhelmed us, lost us. And that can happen.
They just need the outcome. What's the benefit in it for me?
What do I need to do?
Get there? Yeah.
What pain are you saying? Because normally the pain drives it more, right? Is it going to save me money? Is it going to make me money? And how do I get it to where I want it to get to?
Yes.
So there's a few things that most people, without knowing, are looking for. And can you explain to them that journey, custom made to them? And that's, I think, the difference in whatever services you consume is, has that person done that? You'll probably have that when you do your property advice and the strategy.
Yeah, you've got to, it's ultimately, we think about when we get started, I say, look, you're either going to be focused on cash flow, or you're building your capital, which we call cashing out, like flipping property and stuff, or you're building equity for the long term. You're not going to be able to spend that now, but it'll make you very wealthy in the long term. And those three things, they're all important, but one is going to be more important for you right now. Which one is that? And for most people, it tends to be cash flow. They need to build up a surplus income. And for others, it tends to be equity. It might be they're just parking cash in the right investments for the future, for the long term. Then they tend to be the three things I focus on. The strategies come off that. They stem off that. And so, for example, if it's cash flow, it's got to be one of the high yielding strategies like HMO, service accommodation. That's what's going to give you a lot of cash flow. And if it's, for example, cashing out, you're growing your capital, then it's looking at those really profitable developments, flips, that kind of thing. So that's how we tend to think about the strategies. I know there's many different types of businesses that you help, and there's a huge amount we can talk about on this topic. You're very knowledgeable on very different, many different topics. What's the sort of typical profile of the type of business that you work with to help and support?
I think it's the mindset of the entrepreneur, right? So we have a lot of people do trading businesses that they are in a place, they don't really understand what they're doing. They know they're good at something. They're probably a technician. And they want to map that out.
Yeah.
I think one of the key things what you mentioned is cash flow. You got to know. I did a video on personal finance. We can put that in if you don't mind as well. And the reason being, if you haven't got a personal budget, what are we talking about? Because you don't know what you need to earn.
Yes.
So you've got to start with that, right? So if you know that, then you can decide which cash flow or which business model or property model that you're going to do. I always think, unless you're a property developer or some of the high cash flow activities, right? Trading businesses for selling goods and services, but most people I've met, not everyone, there's so many exceptions and we probably know, but generally people have that as their driver, or they've worked in employment, done something a bit on the side, and then they're like, look, now I need to take it to a different level. I want to sack the day job. Right? What you don't want to do is change the job for another job called being an entrepreneur, which is a lot worse paid. Right? Because it's done differently.
For a tyrant.
Exactly. Because you end up then being at the mercy of your clients. So you need to have that. And so we're looking at the entrepreneur's mindset, what they want to achieve, right? And are they willing to back themselves? I emphasize this because just because you say you're an entrepreneur, but you're half-heartedly in it, and funny enough, I think there's another famous saying, if you think you're going to be successful, you are. But if you think you're going to be you fail. And it's true. Because you let off positive vibes, don't you? You go and collaborate, you do things, you get up in the morning.
Find a way.
I've done the breakfasts and all the rest of it, right? The late ones, like today you've got, we're talking about the journey, you've got so many commitments. So just make it count and really, really invest in knowledge, clarity, resilience, knowledge, clarity. And I think many people can achieve. You don't even have to be super good. It helps. If you're good at what you do and you've got power, but you don't, because most of the successful people I've met, you look at them and think, you're not actually really good at that, but you're super successful. Because they know what's important, and what they're not good at, they're good at delegating. You can do your own
right people around you.
You have all these people who say, oh yeah, super, and they're like, oh, I'm really busy. I'm saying, what are you busy on? Oh, I'm doing some bookkeeping. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm like, oh my days. Have you measured your time? And they're like, what do you mean? What's that? So what's the hour valuable to you?
I tend to I was taught this in a way of tasks should be priced in 3 categories: a £10 task, a £100 task, and a £1,000 task. And in a business, the £10 tasks are the basic rudimentary tasks that you could find anybody to do that for you, and you really should not be doing those tasks. They're the first ones you should be giving out to somebody else. And the £100 tasks are a bit more technical, a bit more complex, that you are probably your really skilled people in your team, your business, that would be taking those sort of tasks on. And our time as the owner, the entrepreneur, should really be spent on those, or be defined as a £1,000 task that can't really be delegated. So I can't send my AI twin to do this. We can't delegate these tasks. Kind of things only we can do ourselves and should only be doing ourselves. They're the high value ones, is what we should be doing. And to build the bigger business, we need to be pushing everything else out all the time. And it's just starting with the £10 task first. And, bookkeeping is probably going to cost you more than 10 quid an hour these days. But those kind of tasks we need to get off our plate fast. Give it to the people who can do that, who do bookkeeping for breakfast.
Yeah, and I think another thing is what people struggle with is, especially when you're evaluating, say, accounts, tax, and all this stuff, is, and I'll put this or analogy, I should say, is if you go to a doctor, right? I use this, right? A GP, and they say, I've got something wrong with my heart. You're something wrong with your heart. And you're like, okay, do you expect them to go and change the uniform? And then start operating your heart? You'd be like, head out.
Pull the scalpel out, go right, jump on the couch.
You'll be like, whoa, listen, I need to heart surgeon or
specialist.
But why do they think accountancy tax is different? Because property, believe it or not, property accounting and bookkeeping has some unique aspects, investment and development, which is different to general businesses. And the tax and accounting are different. And also, the exits are different, between, even if we use property developer, property investor.
So we talk about exits, they're going to happen with you're in control of somebody else's.
And you're building it to maintain a lifestyle. And if you have an eye on how it's going to look for the next generation and get them involved, what you're doing is actually achieving so much, because they will realize, whoa, this is what dad, mum did for us. Yeah, or their parents, or their whoever the guardians are, because there's so many variations these days. But that's the drive, because when they understand, do you know what the satisfaction? I can't explain this. I had my son come on the stage. My oldest one was a bit shy, my youngest came on, and he was after me. He was like, "Dada, that was quite interesting." And he was like, "Whoa!" I even got him to do a little, at 7. You go on there on the surgery, you stand in.
They're less self-conscious then as well. They'll quite happily do it.
Because our job, if depending where you are, if you're a parent or whatever, one of the things is, how are you preparing the next generation?
Yes.
Right? Are you showing them? They only get a snapshot, and then it stops the legacy, because people don't prepare them for that, and they think, oh yeah, but when they get older, they don't want to know you, because you haven't spent time when they needed you.
Yes.
And that is a challenge. And dads and mums will have different views on it and all the rest. But that's how the legacy starts. And getting them, also, it could be quite tax efficient to do that. It's huge, isn't it? Because they're involved in the business, right? And they can start at different ages, depending on, and always get tax advice from people who know what they're talking about on this, because you can start the journey. And then they're like, oh, right, this is what our parents have been doing. This is the sacrifice, this is what they did. Right. And then are they more ahead of you or their competitors, which is going to be the people they're competing with?
Yes.
And they have to understand the different facets of business. So when we drive past properties or go past businesses, what do I say to them? Have a look at that. What do you think they're doing? And they're like, yeah, Dada, they're doing this. I said, you've seen them, they make that block into a flats. What they're doing, they're generating value.
Yes.
And these are the things you
get them early to start thinking about.
And because that's how I learned. I used to go with my dad. I didn't even know half the things what he's doing. Is now I look at, oh, that's why he did that.
Yes.
Because the memory is at that point. They may not understand it at that time, but later
you reflect back. You get embedded. You embed it early. Yes.
And this is why then the legacy and the business gets satisfaction, because I go back to what I said, one of the biggest failures is motivation. No one understands
motivation all the time.
Oh, no one understands what I'm doing. I'm fed up with this. Because as you get older, your body, everything changes. So you're
not going to have the same energy in your 20s as you are in your 40s or
50s. It gets more, and it's the motivation. The motivation comes is, right, I'm building something now. I hope my children appreciate, if that is one of your outputs, something I could potentially pass to them or the people working in me, because you've got a great environment, great culture. And this is the entrepreneur journey. And I'll go back to, how do we help them do that? That's where people come see some people ourselves, and it's that journey that they help him end to end. And I think most people in the county tax profession, unfortunately, do not really invest time to become a specialist in one area. They don't realize what people want and what kind of people they can help. Because if I say I can help everybody, really I'm helping nobody.
Yeah, it's a generalist.
It's not.
You're not really going to be adding value.
Yeah, and I think that what it comes down to, Saj, and I think if you can drive that, and then the tax strategies, how to keep your money, all of these become important. You're motivated because you can see the goal.
Yes.
I jokingly said about a Lamborghini. I had a few people contact me saying to me, "Zee, how do I get the Lamborghini? How can I do this tax efficiently?" We're fortunate to have a couple of them. They're only worth about 300 grand, right? These are things all achievable if that is one of your drivers, because if that's going to motivate you, then it works for you.
Yes.
If it's going to motivate you that you go send the kids to private schools, that's for you. You can do it smartly.
Yes.
And this is where you need good advice and actually go and implement, because none of this is worth anything if you just and don't action it. I don't know how you find it from entrepreneurs.
This is a conversation we could spend hours and hours talking about, and I really appreciate you taking the time out, coming speaking to us today. And as I said, you're a man of knowledge on lots and lots of different areas, so many different ways you can help and add value to people as well. What's the best way for somebody to connect with you and reach out to you if that's what they want to do?
We're on all the socials, but LinkedIn is a good one for us to contact. I think you're going to put some links.
I'll put a link on the description, also on the screen, and we'll put it in the description as well.
Yeah, and the links to some of the videos where I think we'll do that, and we said about $250,000. Thank you, Saj, for having us on the show.
Thank you, Zee.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Thanks.